being past 6 p.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors to order for December 17th, 2019. If all members could please press their attend buttons and silence all cell phones. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Locke. And if you could please all remain standing after the invocation for a moment of silence. And now the invocation by Supervisor Locke.
As we begin this meeting, we remember to thank our Creator for all that we are and all that we have. Please help to guide us through the tough decisions we have to make this evening. And a happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to all. Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Locke. If you could all please remain standing and join me for a moment of silence for the passing of Supervisor Kenneth Roble. Thank you. You may be seated. Now, before we go on for a typical adoption of this evening's agenda, just related to the moment of silence for those of you who wouldn't know, Supervisor Ken Roble passed away 2 weeks, actually, as of today on December 3rd. I think you all know the tremendous impact he had on our community, both in the city of Oshkosh, superintendent of streets, as well as on this county board for 40 years. We will plan to have a special recognition, certainly, in his honor in the future, but I think we all can agree it's a tremendous loss for all of us and for this community. So I just wanted to let you all know that we will plan to recognize him in another way in the future as well. So I do want to let you know that the last time we spoke, which frankly every time we spoke, and I think I've heard that from countless folks here when they relayed, he always said how proud he was to serve on this board and how much he enjoyed and appreciated working with it. He really said that pretty much every time. So a tremendous loss. I really saw him very much, and I think you all agree, as a statesman of this body. So we will recognize him again in the future, and obviously will be deeply missed. So moving on down then to the next item, and that would be the adoption of this evening's agenda. And for that, I will call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to adopt this evening's agenda with one correction. I'd like to put Resolution 253 ahead of 251.
There's a motion. There's a motion and a second to approve this evening's agenda with moving item 253 ahead of Resolution 251. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Moving on down to the next item, and that's the time each evening we allow for the public to speak on any item on the agenda this evening or any item under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Please, sir, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jason White, and I reside at 1204 Fairfax Street here in Oshkosh. And I also represent the Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corporation. And as many of you know, I support the proposal for a new airport terminal. And I've also emailed all of you and have heard from several of you about your support for the project, so thank you very much for those responses as well. I want to mention a few things that I didn't mention in the email that I particularly like about the direction of Whitman Airport at present. Some of the things that the airport is doing includes things that many of you have asked for and requested. For years, the airport has needed a master plan to visualize the potential for utilizing the entire airport campus effectively and efficiently, and this is being acted upon. With that in mind, the airport manager and the aviation committee members are seeking ways to diversify the income streams that come into the airport, which I think is also will help the long-term prospects of Whitman Airport as well. The centerpiece of these efforts is a modern airport terminal that everyone can be proud of. The image of the terminal creates first and often long-lasting impressions for visitors and business people who land or take off from Whitman Airport, of which we have the third most in the state of Wisconsin. Impressions are formed not just about Oshkosh, but also about greater Oshkosh in Winnebago County as a result of Whitman Airport. So thank you for your consideration and consideration in voting in favor of the resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on any item on this evening's agenda or anything under county jurisdiction? And if you could please state your name and address for the record, sir.
John Casper. I live at 2785 Leland May Lane here in Oshkosh. I'm here representing the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce. We're a business association that has 950 members. Those businesses employ a little over 30,000 employees here in Winnebago County. We're here also to support the resolutions to construct the general aviation terminal and the financing package that goes along with that. As you know, the terminal was built for the purposes of to support commercial airline service. That's long gone, and it's time to take a look at the reconstruction of that. That has been long overdue. The current terminal in its state has structural deficiencies, has inefficiencies in operation. I think would be way too costly to renovate. So the proposal that the airport administration came up with, I think, is very solid and very sound. It's pretty well documented over the past. I think this goes back about a year or so in terms of conversations. So I think that time has made this project stronger than it was 12 months ago. As you know, Whitman Regional Airport is the busiest commercial general aviation airport in the state of Wisconsin, and as such, we need a facility that will support that marketplace. EAA has certainly been a big asset to this community in terms of getting Oshkosh and Winnebago County recognized as the aviation capital of the world, and we see the effects of that every year during AirVenture. However, if you go out to the airport, there's constant planes coming in and out every day, and a lot of that is corporate air traffic, which is important. So we have to have a facility that really recognizes and supports that general aviation marketplace, and it really also has to be a facility that reflects the image and our significance in the aviation industry in the world here. So we need a better welcoming front door to Oshkosh and Winnebago County. So we ask for your support. We urge you to vote in the affirmative on tonight's action. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I'll say one final time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? Seeing no others, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the evening and move on down to correspondence. I'll call on Clerk Ertmer.
This evening, we have a petition for zoning amendment from Margaret Yoder in the town of Nakaimai, requesting a rezoning to A2. That's forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Committee. We have a notice of claim from the Progressive Group of Insurance Companies on behalf of Ashley Solvang for damage to her vehicle that was caused by an incident with a county snowplow. That's referred to the Personnel and Finance Committee. And then we have resolutions from other counties. Florence County has a resolution that opposes the enactment of any legislation that would infringe upon the right of the people to keep and bear arms. That will be forwarded to the Legislative Committee. Racine County has a resolution in support of Assembly Bill 33, 2019 Assembly Bill 33 and 2019 Senate Bill 39 relating to the expungement of criminal and civil convictions and non-conviction records. And Sawyer County has a resolution that is in support of the nonpartisan procedure for redistricting. And that is also referred to the Legislative Committee. That's all.
Thank you, Clerk Ertmer. Moving on to the next agenda item, and that's reports from committees, commissions, and boards. I see a number of call-ins, so first I'll call on Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Just a small little conversation I have, and then I'll speak later on the resolutions. But I wanted to get this information out there. It is with the highest respect for my colleagues on this current county board that I ask for your support tonight for 3 resolutions for Whitman Regional Airport to move forward with a new building. We've done our due diligence, and I think we've kept everybody on this board well informed. It's been a long journey, but I certainly would appreciate your support for the resolutions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker, Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to report the culmination of almost 2 years of work by our former CVSO, and his name was Joe Olick, and me, in collaboration with Senator Tammy Baldwin's office. As you can see from the handout on your desks, there was kind of a flurry of activity between November 19th and last week, when a bipartisan quartet of senators introduced the CVSO bill in the United States Senate. CVSO stands for Commitment to Veteran Support and Outreach Act. Joe and I both provided quotes for the rollout of this bill, but Joe's obviously more eloquent than I because he was quoted in the rollout. The bill itself will authorize $50 million a year for 5 years to expand and support CVSOs or their equivalents in those states that don't have them, to identify and obtain help for veterans who may be contemplating suicide. Joe's quote is especially hard-hitting, and I'd like to read it. We currently have lost more veterans by suicide than those we have lost in executing our current wars. It is imperative to have advocates in the counties and communities where veterans and their families live to connect them with their earned benefits. This legislation provides resources to market VA benefits, create new CVSO offices to reach those who are struggling, or provide training for current CVSO offices. This will enhance the services for our veterans and ensure they have access to well-trained professional advocates at the local level to connect them to their benefits and improve the quality of their lives. They deserve those services for their service to our great country. And that's a quote from Joe Olick, who's currently the CVSO in Brown County. Our next step is to, we're not done yet. Our next step is to contact House members to see if they will support or sponsor a companion bill in the House. Joe is contacting Mike Gallagher, and I'll be talking with Chris Green from Glenn Grothman's office. We've spoken more than a few times on veteran suicide already, so he's pretty well in touch. Hopefully we can get them to sponsor. So Joe and I are really happy about getting this thing almost done, and now all we have to do is get it passed. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder, and thank you for your efforts. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Spellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should have done this last month, but the time got away from me too quickly. I want to thank Sue Ertmer and Julie Bartels and the staff at the county clerk's office for patience with me as I was down in Indianapolis when my father was dying. And I thank the people who reached out to me with expressions of sympathy, and I appreciate being allowed to be away and not hassled about that. Not that I thought you would hassle me. It was good to know that it was taken care of and I could concentrate on his needs. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Spellman, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
I want to report out that the newly established Complete Count Committee met on December 9th. We met with a partnership specialist who will help Winnebago County have a complete and accurate count in the 2020 census. Our next meeting will be in early January, and we look forward to working with different county departments and the U.S. Census Bureau to help us achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Spellman. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This afternoon, the committee went ahead and met with Sawyer Creek from Oshkosh that we've been talking about for quite a while. So the Planning and Zoning Committee met with them, and we had a long discussion. It was over an hour that we met with them. Did we get anything resolved? I will tell you no. I want to be truthful. But we have talked about, and I just asked our chairman before, and we're going to have them come in on January 7th, 2020 at special sessions and give the whole county board what they see in it and that. And our committee is going to go out personally and invite those farmers that were in here and residents that were out there. There's like a dozen, 10, 12 of them. And we're going to break that up and going to go out personally and invite them to come to that meeting. Now, there'll be no decision that night or anything just like with any other special sessions, but they'll be able to hear it because some of them can make it, some of them can't. But so that's what we've done on that. So it will be at special sessions on January 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to the gathering of information in respect to the Oshkosh Sawyer Creek floodplain mapping issue, which Vice Chairman just addressed, I attended a National Flood Insurance Program, a FEMA Flood Mapping Changes webinar on December 3rd, 2019. And my major takeaway from the flood mapping webinar is that if you are mapped into a flood zone, your mortgage holder can force you to buy flood insurance. So there are consequences for those 30 individuals who may get mapped into a floodplain. If they have mortgages, it will impact them financially.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Saturday, Supervisor Bender and I attended the Hmong New Year celebration. It's very unique for a couple of different reasons. It's been held at the Expo Center for over 20 years. From what we learned, that is that it's the one big celebration I think that Hmong celebrate every year. It also brings many people from around the Midwest for the New Year's event, and then the Labor Day event brings people from all over the country. They have a very colorful dance competition. A couple of things that are unique about their New Year: they gave every dignitary, like me and Supervisor Bender, an egg, which I believe represents the experiences of the past year. And then they have a ball toss, which was kind of interesting, because you and a female partner toss a ball while they sing a Hmong song. And many of us thought this was a great way that maybe they used to introduce partners together. But it's a very unique event. It's been here for over 20 years, brings people from all over the country. And when it comes to Labor Day, I would encourage anyone to go to it, because that's even bigger. So that was a very unique event.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda and move on to the next item, which is the approval of the proceedings from November 19, 2019 County Board meeting. Is there a motion? There's a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion, changes? And we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next two items. That's County Executive's report and County Executive's appointment. Executive Harris is excused this evening. He is with family. So we'll have our Finance Director, Vicki Fitzgerald. Please go right ahead.
And as you said, I'm speaking on Mark Harris's behalf tonight, and I wanted to just touch on a few resolutions. As Mary Beth, Supervisor Gabert had mentioned already, we have 3 resolutions on the agenda tonight that have to do with a new general aviation facility, terminal facility. And if you could put that on there. I just put a couple slides up to explain the history of all the resolutions, just so there's no confusion when we vote on those. So overall, we approved a design cost, or I should say, the board had approved a design cost in January of 2016 of $600,000. So that already has been partially spent on the original design. Secondly, we had 2 previous resolutions, one during the 2018 budget deliberations, and then one following in that December for a $1.1 million to demolish the the terminal. And I'll explain more what we're going to do with that resolution. Thirdly, tonight, coming before you will be $5.7 million for the construction. So altogether, the total cost would be $7,400,000, 6.8 for the construction and demolition, and $600,000 for design. To break that down a little bit for you with the resolutions, first off tonight, Resolution 253 that we are going to put first in line on these resolutions for the airport is going to redirect the previously earmarked funds for the demolition. It originally, during budget deliberations, had been put forth for demolition of one part, the main terminal, up to the tunnel, and then repairing the roof of the current area where Basler, our FBO, sits. But tonight we are going to redirect the purpose of that because we still plan to demolish the terminal, but we'll demolish the whole facility, including the Basler part. So that is going to be Resolution 253, and again, there was two previous resolutions. First one during budget deliberations in 2018. Second one was just to change the funding source to bonding. Next, we have on Resolution 251 is the overall resolution to construct the new general aviation terminal facility. That will be for $5.7 million. I wanted to show you what the funding is, though. The funding is we're going to be asking for $1.9 million to be bonded for, $2 million to come out of our undesignated general fund balance that will not have to be repaid. And then the state Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics has committed to giving us $1.8 million towards the project to equal the $5.7 million. Then the third resolution on tonight has to do with our design, and it's Resolution 252. Back in January of 2016, the board had appropriated $600,000 for design of the new terminal. Then they came back in May of 2016 to hire Martin Riley as the architect and to get authorization to spend part of that $600,000, which they had the amount of $288,550. That leaves us with the remaining design funds of $311,450. We're asking to cover the redesign and then the bidding and construction administration costs for an extra, or not extra, for $183,000 authorization to spend out of that $600,000. So I just wanted to explain that we're not asking for additional appropriation. It's part of that $600,000. And we can definitely talk more about that when we get into it, but I just wanted to hopefully give you a little more background of what this all entails for these three resolutions. And then the County Executive Harris also wanted me to bring up Resolution 257. And that's to authorize the execution of a 3-year lease agreement between Winnebago County Parks Department and Richard Helms, which is a current employee out at the Parks Department. And it's that the Netzer property that we had purchased, there's a farmhouse there that they're asking for him to rent. County Executive Harris feels it's a win-win situation, better security for the Expo Center and service at the Expo, and it would bring in income for the county and convenience for the employee. I believe it's $800 a month rent that we would be collecting. So I just wanted to mention that. So that's it for my report.
Please, if you can go ahead then, County Executive's appointment.
All right, and the county executive has one appointment. He would like to hereby make the following appointment for Director of Child Support, Julie Mabry. And in your packet, we do have her resume attached for your reference. And we feel she's very qualified to head the Department of Child Support. She has worked for Child Support as the office manager for 5 years. Previously had worked for Department of Human Services. And she is in the back, and I'd like her to stand up and speak for a moment, just to give us a little background about herself. I warned her ahead of time, I promise.
I wasn't warned, yeah. That's true.
Please, go right ahead.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Julie Mabry. Like Vicki had said here, I started with Winnebago County 12 years ago, 2007, in economic support in the NENA branch office up there. So I issued some Badger Care and Food Share W-2 child care for about 3.5 years. And then I moved over to Department of Human Services as office systems and confidential records supervisor for approximately 4 years before I came over to child support, and I've been there for 5 years now as the office supervisor.
So,
Very good. Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you all.
Appreciate it.
thank you.
All right, so there was a recommendation for the appointment to Julie Mabry as the Director of Child Support. Is there a motion? There's a motion and a second to approve the appointment of Julie Mabry as Director of Child Support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Welcome aboard, congratulations, and look forward to working with you. Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. Appreciate you speaking in your comments. So moving on down to the next item, that's County Board Chairman's report. So first of all, I wanted to thank all the individuals who came out yesterday for the Christmas and the holiday party that we had at Jimmy's White House Inn in Butamore last night. It was nice attendance, actually, and I'd never been there before, but I'll be back. The attendance was about 66 individuals, so it was a very, very good turnout, and the credit goes to the clerk's office, so if we could please give a round of applause to the clerk's office. They did a wonderful job, as they always do, and I know quite a few individuals were involved in the office as well, so many thanks certainly to all of them. Did want to, I know we have a resolution coming up, the first one, but I've had some questions in terms of the vacancy on the Highway Committee, and I just want to make you all aware that I will plan to put a recommendation for an appointment to that committee for our January meeting. So I've been asked about that, and we'll put forward an individual for an appointment at that time. So we'll make sure we do that. Then I just wanted to also extend a warm Merry Christmas to everyone and Happy Holidays to all you, and wish you all a wonderful new year with family and friends. Like I said last year, I've really enjoyed working with all you in this capacity. It's wonderful. It truly is an honor. It really is. Each time I do it. Thank you, sir. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Really enjoy it. And Happy New Year to you all, and safe holidays to all of you with your family. Okay, so moving on down, that concludes my report for this evening. So moving on down then to the next item, that's zoning reports and ordinances. We have two of them this evening. So the first one is report number 001, Irma and Marvin C. Potres, Town of Nakai. For that, I will call on Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of report number 1.
There's a motion and a second to approve report number 1. Any discussion? Then we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to amendatory ordinance number 12-0119, rezoning from B3 Regional Business A2 General Agriculture to A2 General Agriculture for tax parcel numbers 012-0594-02 and 012-0594-03. Once again, I'll call on Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of a mandatory ordinance 12-0119.
There's a motion and a second to approve a mandatory ordinance number 12-0119. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll once again do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item. That's report number 002, Dale J. Voskul, Town of Napuskin. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of report number 2.
There's a motion and a second to approve report number 002. Any discussion? Seeing none, once again, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item. That's a mandatory ordinance number 110219, rezoning from A2 General Agriculture to R1 Rural Residential for tax parcel numbers 014-0283 and 014-0283-03. I'll once again call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of mandatory ordinance number 110219.
There's a motion and a second to approve a mandatory ordinance number 110219. Any discussion? Seeing none, once again, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes zoning reports and ordinances. So now we'll move on to resolutions and ordinances. So the first item is a motion to suspend County Board Rule 5.11, which is to suspend County Board Rule 5.11. The chair's appointment to fill a county board vacancy shall be made not later than 60 days after the vacancy occurs. I will make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. So just so you're all clear, we do in fact have a rule. That's what's cited as 511, and it states exactly that. The chair's appointment to fill a county board vacancy shall be made not later than 60 days after the vacancy occurs. I'm recommending this for two reasons. One, it's an honor and recognition to Supervisor Robel. He's been with us for over 40 years on this county board, and I think he truly deserves that honor. Two, the second is a practical matter, in the sense that if we were to appoint someone, that individual actually would not be able to take out papers by the time we would actually appoint them by this body. So it's not that we can't do that, but that is also a practical implication, anyways, of potentially appointing someone for the remaining 2.5 to 3 months. But I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I was thinking of doing this even before I understood that practical implication, because you never know of the timing of this sort of situation. But that's basically the background on at least my proposal to suspend these rules. So I'll open it up for discussion. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan. Were you? No? I believe then Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I to understand this is a one-time only exemption for this particular case?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine then.
Yes.
That's fine.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. I'll next call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to expand the universe of discussion in respect to your request. Certainly, it's a great honor and a loss for Ken Robel in the district. And of course, it's a very short period of time that the new appointee would serve. But I might add, there's a benefit of recruiting and appointing a new supervisor, because by doing that, you're going to stir up interest in that seat. And if you advertise for the appointment, you're going to have people come forward, and you're going to be able to identify individuals who would have interest in serving as Ken Robel did for so many years. And for that reason, I'm concerned about limiting that appointment. So for that reason, I don't support the suspension of the rules, because I think it's a great benefit to the individuals, as an even a greater benefit to the people of that district to have representation, as well as having a full county board for the sensitive issues that we are given the responsibility to consider. And it can make a difference. One vote makes a difference. And that could be the vote that makes the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, and I totally understand your position, but let me address a couple concerns, and then I have a question, if I might. I also believe the district needs to be represented. And perhaps more importantly, is our 3/4 vote rule. Because if you have an absence, that's an automatic no to a question of bonding. And that could be a serious concern. I don't know what's coming up next 3 months. However, I would have a tendency to support your point of view if I'm assured somebody has taken out papers to run for that district. Has anybody taken out papers to run for the district?
I'll call on County Clerk Ertmer.
We've had one person come in and pick up the papers, so we anticipate him filing, but he has not filed anything as of
Okay,
yet.
but he did pick them up to circulate
Correct.
the nomination papers, so
Yes.
that is very good. Because that means that we have a person that's potentially interested in the candidacy for that position, and it would be filled. Because if nobody was running, you'd have to make the appointment in or at a later date. I mean, that's the situation, so. I guess I'll support your position, you know, I certainly respect your point of view, but it is a concerning matter, so that's kind of where I'm coming down on it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one quick question. I too am on the fence with this one. I think the folks in that district do need representation. But just from a timeline standpoint, assuming that we were going to fill the vacancy, do we have an approximate timeline on about how long it would take to put the information out there to the public, do the interviews and all that?
Yes. So there's a public announcement period that we have to do, and the clerk can answer, but I know it's at least 2 weeks, but it might be longer than that.
I don't know that there's anything written in stone, but typically it's been a couple of weeks, because once we get it, we have to advertise, and then we usually take a couple of weeks to collect applications and give Chairman Ramos time to interview people. And then the problem is there's that January 7th deadline to get their nominations papers filed. So most likely you wouldn't have someone selected in time for them to turn around and file nomination papers. So that's the concern, so.
It's a practical, almost impossibility to have someone approved, because that individual actually has to be approved by this board with the appointment for them to actually file nomination papers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will approve of this, but as I talked to you last week, I do kind of agree with Supervisor Fari. Since this is the second time it's happened in 2 consecutive terms where we've had a supervisor who's been absent or have not been attending for a long period of time. And that has to be addressed, the big picture, but I do support this. Also, it's a little history. A couple of times in our history or in past years, this happened. I mean, this happened with all respect to me and Supervisor Warnicki when our supervisor died in November of 1997, and we both applied for opening, and he got denied, and we both were election. But also, I want to remind people, I believe it was in 2001, preparing for the 2002 election, when Supervisor Julie Lesky announced at the Christmas party that she was not running for re-election. In fact, she was resigning at that time, and then we appointed someone very quickly. I don't know if we had 60 days, but it has been done in the past, and I didn't like that. I would rather do what the chairman's doing now. If it's less than 60 days and can't get the advertising out to advertise position, I think we should leave it open until the election. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, even if no one would file, I would think isn't there that 5-day non-candidacy period? I mean, that someone could run. I mean, I can't believe that Mr. Robo said he's not running. Maybe he didn't, but I'm just saying I do support this, and I think we do have to correct it for things that happen in the future.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Lautenschlager, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I definitely support this, and I agree certainly with the Clerk Ertmer. It's whoever you appoint, is not gonna be in time taking the papers out, so you really put that person at a big disadvantage, especially that we know right now that somebody has already taken papers out, they haven't circulated them, but if they turn those signatures in, they're gonna be on the ballot, and that person who you appoint isn't gonna be on the ballot because they got disadvantaged. So I agree with what you're doing, Chair, because, I mean, I wouldn't want to be at the disadvantage.
Thank you Supervisor Lautenschlager. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Finch.
It is my turn?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't quite see the problem with a person being nominated and not filling out papers to run in April. They don't have to wait until they get appointed to show an interest in the seat, and if one or two or three people are showing an interest and have taken out papers and are circulating signature pages, they don't have to wait for you to appoint them to do that, just as anybody who wants to run for office. So that shouldn't preclude someone from filling out or filing to run in April and still possibly, but not necessarily, be appointed by you soon. I guess I can't see how that's a problem. They don't have to be appointed in order to wait around until they can say, oh, if I've been appointed, now I better file papers. File them now, if you're interested. That's all I have to say. Although I understand your predicament, truly.
Thank you Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am for this because of the simple fact that if we can pick somebody right now, we're almost guaranteed to have somebody to fill that seat at our new term. Come pretty close to it because they're going to get a chance to see what it's all about. You know, many times we've had people come in and they lasted maybe 2 years, if that. Then they bowed off for this reason or that reason. But here, by having this now, whomever gets selected has the opportunity for a couple, 2, 3 months to see what we're actually doing and how we're working for the people. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to share with my fellow supervisors an observation that while the board vacancy should be filled according to the rules within 60 days after the vacancy occurs, let me remind fellow supervisors that our late departed Ken Roble hasn't attended meetings for 6 months. So that vacancy has been available for 6 months. Those people in his district have had no representation on the board. And to postpone it for an additional 3 months until the election, and the contingency that the person will fill out the forms and fill out the forms correctly and file the forms and get them notarized is a contingency. We can't know that that's going to happen, but we can know that if our chairman appoints someone for the 3 months, for February, March, and the month of April, there's going to be representation for Ken's district and for his for our citizens. So I would like to ask you to give additional thought to suspending that rule, because I think the benefits of appointing someone are greater than the benefits of suspending the rule and not appointing someone. Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go to a vote. The only one thing I just want to make sure everyone's clear is if we don't pass this, then we will have to do a public announcement period, and those individuals who express interest, unless they have taken out papers to get their name on the ballot, I will need to let them know that they will be serving for 2 or 2.5 months. So I just want to make sure everyone truly understands the practical implications, because if they didn't take out papers and get their name on the ballot, by the time our public announcement period is over, they won't have the opportunity. So anyone I attempt to recruit for that 2.5 months, I will obviously have to let them know that their opportunity to continue on the board, if there is someone who did take out papers, of course, their only recourse would be to do a write-in vote. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear on the practical implications of it. Okay. Seeing no other calls, we'll do a roll call vote on this. It does require 2/3 of the members present, or 24, to pass. So all those in favor, vote aye. Vote no if you don't. And that motion passes 31-3. So we will go ahead and suspend our rules for 511. Okay, so moving on down then to the next resolution. That's resolution number 249-122019. Disallow claim of Sophia Q. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 249/12/2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution 249-122019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, and that's resolution number 250-122019. Authorize a transfer of $15,563 from the undesignated general fund balance to the Winnebago County Office of Corporation Counsel's labor accounts for fiscal year 2020 to increase the hours of 3 paralegals from 37.5 to 40 hours a week, and to accommodate the higher than originally budgeted wages of a recently hired paralegal. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of Resolution 250-12-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 250-12-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. And if you recall, we amended the agenda, so we are on to resolution 253. So that's resolution number 253-12-2019. Redirect $1.1 million previously earmarked and approved for the airport terminal property pursuant to resolution numbers 2018-11-2017 and 223-12-2017 to demolish the airport terminal building and construct a general aviation terminal facility through the issuance of general obligation promissory notes. And for that, I'll call on Supervisor Gabbard.
I move for the adoption of resolution 253-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution 253-12-2019. Any discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you. I request a recorded vote.
We'll absolutely do so, Supervisor Eisen. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to a roll call. Oh, I apologize. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't really quite sure why there had to be 4 different resolutions for the airport, unless it's because there were different amounts needed to pass that. But then there were 2 of them needed 3/4 of membership. What do you mean, I'm looking at 3/4. But I was confused by that. I'll go along with it. But my real question is, if any one of these fails, does that mean the airport fails again? Good grief.
Essentially, this project cannot go through completion without another resolution if one of them fails, but I'll call on the the Director, Vicki Fitzgerald, to answer those questions.
Okay, the 1.1 million had to be separate because we already had a resolution, 2 resolutions, one to spend the 1.1 million on demolishing and the roof repair. The second one in December was to bond for that 1.1 million, so to change the funding source for the undesignated general fund balance to that. So we don't need another 3/4 vote on this one because we've already 3/4 voted on bonding. So that's why that one's not 3/4 and had to be separate. The second one was for construction, and then the third one was just to get authority to spend out of that $600,000 appropriated for design. So they're just three separate things because that already had two separate resolutions prior.
Okay,
Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
thank you.
Thank you, Director Fitzgerald, and thank you, Supervisor Powers. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me express my gratitude for this resolution being brought forward. Specifically for myself, the lack of disposition on this resolution from 2017, to me, has been a real sore spot. So I'm glad to see this is getting cleared up. I thank those who have brought it forward. And hopefully everyone will support it, and we can simply move on from what we did in 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Seeing no other call-ins, we will do a roll call vote on this. So vote aye if you approve the redirection of the 1.1 million. Vote no if you don't. This requires a simple majority, so that's different than the other resolutions we'll take up afterward. And that motion carries 34-0. So now we will move back up to resolution number 251-12-2019. Authorize a capital project for Whitman Regional Airport to construct a new general aviation terminal building at a cost of $5.7 million to be funded as follows. $2 million transferred from the undesignated general fund balance, $1.9 million of bond proceeds, and $1.8 million reimbursed from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation Bureau of Aeronautics. I'll once again call on Supervisor Gabbard.
I move for the approval of Resolution 251-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 251-12-2019. Any discussion? I'll call first on Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, we've come a long way, haven't we? This has been a long time coming, but I think it's been a useful project, a useful process. Before we vote, and I'm sure hopefully it'll be a unanimous vote again, I'd like to salute one man in this chamber, a man of great honor and perseverance that I learned a great deal from over the years. Never gives up. That's Bob Warnke. I salute you, Bob. We really are lucky to have you as part of our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren, and thank you for your comments, and you as well, Supervisor Warnke. So next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Request a recorded vote.
Absolutely, was already planned to, Supervisor Eisen. Thank you. Next speaker, Supervisor Shorsey.
I guess I don't need to say my prepared comments, it sounds like, so just let's go. Let's just get this done, get off the dime. It's been 16 years, let's go.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Seeing no other call-ins, we will do a roll call vote. So vote aye if you approve the funding in the three different ways. Vote no if you don't. This does require a 3/4 vote of the membership. Okay, 27 votes. And that passes 32-2. All right, very good. So we got one other item related, and that is resolution number 252-12-2019. Authorize additional spending of $183,000 for redesign, bidding, and construction administration services of the Whitman Regional Airport new general aviation terminal building to be funded with bond proceeds. I'll once again call on Supervisor Gabbard.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 252-122019.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? I'll first call on Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank
know
you,
you were trying
Mr.
to call.
Chairman. Vicki, if I might, for clarification, I just believe you just said the 183,000 is coming from the already approved $600,000.
That is correct. That is correct.
But it says in the resolution that this is to be funded with bond proceeds?
That is correct, because the 600,000 was appropriated in 2016. We do not bond, we bond after the fact, so we have not bonded the full 600,000. So
Oh, you only bonded, how much of it have you bonded?
we bonded 250,000 so far,
Okay.
and we've spent 237,000.
Okay, so in reality, we're not really gonna be spending the full 600,000. It's gonna come out 300 and some odd thousand, as you pointed out.
And it should be. I did look at the 2016 resolution. There is another whereas, if there was excess, that it could be used for construction. Hopefully, we won't have to use it, but it does say that in the resolution.
Okay, so you intend to bond for the full 600,000?
Only if we spend that. I won't bond for something if I'm not going to spend it, because then I'll have arbitrage.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari, and a good question. I'll next call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I request a recorded vote.
Absolutely, we'll do so, Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other call-ins, we will do a recorded vote. So vote aye if you approve the $183,000 for the redesign, bidding, and construction. Vote no if you don't. Once again, it does require a 3/4 vote of the membership, or 27. Oh, already passes 33-1. All right, very good. So that project basically is now fully funded, okay? All right, so moving on down then, now we are down to Resolution 254, okay? So Resolution number 254-12, 2019. Authorize Whitman Regional Airport to accept additional land rental revenue for fiscal year 2019 from the Experimental Aircraft Association in the amount of $116,603 and appropriate the funds to capital outlay to begin design work on hangar redevelopment. Once again, call on Supervisor Gabbard.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 254-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve Resolution 254-12, 2019. Any discussion? I see a couple call-ins. So first I'll call on Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick item of clarification, lines 13 and 14. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but it says the amendment lease will increase from, and then later it says effective January 1 of 2019. Is it future or past, or am I misunderstanding this?
I'll call on the Finance Director for the response.
Actually, the amendment was to go for 2020, but it is going to be retroactive to January 1/19, so we could say, we could change that and just say the amended lease increased from, we could change that wording, because they are going to pay us retroactively as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
there wasn't a mix-up on dates. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this resolution is a great tribute to our new airport director. I mean, he's gone and he's redesigned all the leases out there, and he's coming up with an extra $116,000, and we know that those hangars out there need repair and some of them need to be replaced. And this is a smart way of using that money to use it for the design of those new hangars, because that's what we need. And I attribute to Jim, our airport director. He did a wonderful job on this.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and go to a vote. We'll go ahead and do a voice vote on this one. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Director Schell, just want to say thank you for all your efforts on all four of those resolutions and the progress behind them. So, thank you. Okay, moving on down to the next item. That's resolution number 255-12, 2019. amend section 19.24, parent A of the General Code of Winnebago County to reflect implementation of a soccer shelter rental fee to be charged during tournament and special event usage. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 255-122019. Any questions? Rob and Rick are both back there. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I think this is a wonderful, we've had supervisors on this board for years saying, you know, we need to bring on some kind of income for the parks. And this is a great way of doing it, of charging these soccer people for their tournaments or whatever, to get some kind of extra revenue for the parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. I see a couple more call-ins. First, I'll call on Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Powers.
If I might clarify the comment that was just made, this basically is assessing a fee to individual soccer clubs other than the Oshkosh Youth Soccer Club who are exempt. Okay, that's just that clarification. Thank you.
Good clarification. Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a significant amount, but I'm just wondering why the smallest group is charged a different amount Monday through Thursday, and a larger amount Friday through Sunday, when the other groups are not. I realize it's only $10 or $5, depending on which shelter you're looking at, but I don't understand if it's $80 for one group during the week and $80 for the same size group on the weekend, and so on. Why is it 50 and 60? I'm just wondering why we chose to pick that one group out and say, we're going to charge you more.
I'll call on Director Way, who's in the back. Please, go right ahead.
Now, the lower prices is intended to encourage more demand during the weekdays when lower usage occurs, and then it would go up on the weekends when higher demands, more people want to use the shelters. It follows the pattern of all our other shelter rentals, too.
But it doesn't, but you're not doing that for groups of under 300 and under 1,000. You're only doing it for the small group. I'm just wondering, what was the thought behind doing that for that one smaller group?
It's lower for smaller groups. I mean, that's how it should read.
Okay,
Yeah.
for the smaller groups, Monday through Thursday, it's $50. If they come through on the weekend, it's $60.
Yeah.
But the other ones are paying 80 and 80, or 140 and 140, or a minimum of 220, depending on how many there are. The rest of them all pay the same amount during the week and during the weekends. The smaller group is being charged more Monday through Thursday. I'm sorry, more Friday through Sunday. Why that one group?
For a smaller group on weekends, it's, again, because it relates to the demand going up. Again, a smaller group is charged less. I don't know if this is answering your question, is charged less because of the expectation of less use
You're not
demand.
charging them less, you're charging them more.
Yeah,
If they come Monday through Thursday, it's going to be $50. If they come Friday through Sunday, it's going to be more, it's going to be $60. Whereas the bigger groups would be 80 during the week and 80 on the weekend, or 140 during the week and 140 during the weekend. You're charging the smaller group more money on the weekend, but you're not charging anybody else more for using weekend time.
I think I know what you're saying, or the flip side is you could say you're charging them less during the weekday. So your question would also be, why aren't you charging the
Okay.
larger groups less
Okay, then
during
why
the
aren't you
weekday?
why aren't you
and
charging
trying to
the bigger
encourage
groups
them
less?
to work during the weekday? Both sides of the coin. So I guess I'll ask the question I think you're also asking. Why are you not charging the larger groups less to potentially reserve on the weekdays and encourage them in the weekdays?
well, typically that is what we're getting, is the larger groups on the weekends. We didn't need to adjust it. For the pavilions in particular, it's a little bit of a different animal than the other shelters. The patterns of use for the larger groups, again, are higher. There's less need to respond to that.
I think I didn't say it correctly. Why aren't you trying to charge a lower rate for the larger groups on weekdays to encourage some of them to reserve during the weekday? I think that's what she's also wondering.
Now, let me, it follows the same pattern it always has.
Well, I don't understand it.
Okay, shelters.
Is
I still don't know. It follows the pattern of it goes up for the smaller groups on the weekends.
But why
That-
just for the smaller groups and not for the larger groups? Why doesn't their fee increase on the weekend? Whereas the smaller groups fee doesn't?
No, you're talking the upper range of it. Okay, I can explain that. That's, the reason for that is, I see what you're saying, at 300 and above for the pavilion, not changing the rate like the smaller ones.
you know, there's a different
Yeah.
different rate.
Yeah. Number one, it has followed that pattern for years, so it wasn't ever questionable what you're looking at. It predates me, but that's one point to make on it. We've never examined it, but I can kind of explain, I guess it would have been established perhaps for the reason that there's not a great deal of demand over that 300 for the pavilion, for the shelter in this instance, and if anything, we would anticipate it might discourage folks. You know, if we bump it up and we're not even getting that amount anyways to further exasperate the price range, probably would discourage it even more. So I can't explain the impetus for having it established that way, other than it has followed that pattern in the past. I have not adjusted those numbers to differentiate the higher ones and the lower ones. I know what you're getting at, but I guess until you've brought it up, it hasn't been examined in that frame.
Okay, thank you, Director Way. Anything further, Supervisor Powers?
I'm still confused, but I'm not gonna argue about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
I think Supervisor Powers brings up a good point. I think the point is just consistency. It just, you know, I get, it makes sense that you would have lower during the week if you want to encourage people to come in higher on the weekend. I think with Supervisor Powers, I don't want to speak on her behalf, but at least what I'm thinking is why not just make it consistent for the other groups? You know, encourage the bigger groups to come during the week. So, you know, maybe that won't change right now, but maybe just something to look at in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and try a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so moving on down to the next item. That's resolution number 256-12, 2019. Authorize an automated teller machine licensing agreement between Winnebago County and Cornerstone Processing Solutions Incorporated. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 256-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 256-12, 2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this, but I'd just like to let the board know that this is one place, like, I'm going to say the fair used to get money off from, because they used to go ahead and have ATM out there, and they used to make money off from them ATM machines, and they were taken away from us through the county, and they took them over, and so they're making money off them now. But I'm going to support it. I think it's great, but I just want the whole board to know that more and more keeps getting taken away all the time, and that's one of the spots that it does.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, that's resolution number 257-12, 2019. Authorize execution of 3-year lease agreement between Winnebago County Parks Department and Richard Helms for property located at 770 East County Road Y, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Chairman, I move for resolution number 257-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 257-12, 2019. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During my tenure, which is approaching 18 years on this board, I believe this is the first time I've ever seen the resolution brought forward by the minority vote of 2 committee members to this full board. Look at your vote on the Personnel and Finance Committee. It was 2 yes, 3 no. So the committee said no to this resolution. The other 2 members of the committee have brought it forward, which creates quite a dilemma, because we all know that pretty much the county board operates under committee recommendations. I believe Supervisor Wingren has brought that up multiple times during my tenure. So perhaps the 3 or one of the 3 that didn't support it can address this, but certainly at this point, if I vote to approve this, I'm basically saying that committee was not recognized. That's how I look at it. So maybe somebody can address that.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the same concern as Supervisor Fari did, but one of my other concerns was, I thought when this land was purchased, and I could have been wrong, but I thought it was stated that the buildings were no good anymore. The only thing that we could use was the well, that they were going to use for the gardens. And now, I like Mr. Helms. I think he's just great. He helps out there an awful lot. I know he does, so I'm not pointing any fingers at that. But all of a sudden, we've got a house now good enough to rent out to whomever it may be. And not only for a 1-year term, they want to do it for a 3-year term. And what happens if something happens in that house? Is that person going to fix up the house? Or is the parks going to pay for it? Or who's actually going to be responsible for it? Or is it going to come back that we have to fix it up because he has the right to live in there for 3 years? I don't know who wants to answer that question, or if there is an answer to it, or if, I guess Rob's going to get to take it.
Sure. I'll call on Director Way in the
You are
back.
correct. The intent was to originally demolish the house. That funding is currently in the parks budget. I don't believe I've ever delivered a statement that the house was in a derelict condition. It was usable. What the intent was for that property to eventually be converted over into camping and parking purposes down the line. And that probably won't happen in any eventuality for another 3 to 5 years minimum. As we evolved our plans for that site, the roads, what we needed to do in that area, it became plain that we probably wouldn't be touching that area of the property for, again, that minimum of 3 to 4 years. It is a livable house. It's dated. We've had it checked over by various parties, including our own county agencies, and it is checked off as in livable conditions. We haven't encountered any real impairments that would stop somebody from comfortably living there. As you can see in the lease, it also provides the provision for improvements to be made upon approval from the Parks Director, and the committee would have some involvement with that too. So it's not the intent to fix it up. It likely will down the line be demolished, however, not in the near future.
Is there some reason you didn't just offer a 1-year contract then and continuous, if you'd like?
I'd have to talk it over with Rick. If the understanding was it would be for 3 years, because we had no plans for 3 years. I don't know that we ventured into it being a 1-year lease.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Way.
I do want to point out there is a provision in it for either party to vacate the lease with 120 days notice. So it's not the intent to leave it locked in as a residence if the need arises for us to demolish it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Way, and thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Before we go on with the next speakers, I want to call on our Corporation Counsel, Mary Ann Miller, to provide some clarification and context in regards to committees and resolutions.
Thank you. Just given the discussion, I want to clarify, under Rule 7.6, it indicates any committee of jurisdiction may submit to the county board a request which has been rejected by the Personnel and Finance Committee. However, this request resolution must have a 2/3 affirmative vote of the county board membership for adoption, except at the county board annual budget session. As the board can see that, as Supervisor Fari indicated, yes, the vote at Personnel and Finance was 2-3, but the vote at Parks and Rec was 4-0. So under 7.6, I think that answers the question, but I would like to point out that the required vote would be 2/3 affirmative vote, not a majority for this.
I appreciate that clarification, and please note the 2/3 vote, because that is different than what you see on your agenda. So thank you very much for that clarification. Moving on down to the next speaker, that's Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
This is strictly just a financial proposal for the county. We're gonna get $30,000 rent from that house. If we tear the house down this summer, it's gonna cost us $15,000. So we can rent that house out for 3 years, get $30,000, pay $15,000 to tear it down at that time, and still be $15,000 ahead. And we're gonna work on the first 20 acres we bought. We have to cut part of that berm out. We have to put a road in there. We have to make the camping sites. There's no way that the park has the money to develop that for at least 3 to 5 years. But we know we have to, because we can't park in County Park forever. You know, they told us they're gonna give us around 5 years, and then there's gonna be no more parking in County Park. So that 20 acres is eventually gonna be camping and parking lots, but we don't have $2 or $3 million to do that, and I'm sure the county board's not gonna give it to us. I mean, if we could get that money, it'd be great. We'll tear the house down and move forward and get that whole thing set up, and in a year or two, it'll be operational. But the house is just gonna sit there, it's gonna get vandalized, the windows are gonna get busted, you're gonna have basically kids partying in that house, and it's gonna be an eyesore. I mean, yeah, we can tear it down, but why would we not give the taxpayers $30,000 and tear that house down in 3 years and be $15,000 to the good? It's like just being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. I mean, if it was my house, I've rented houses for 45 years. I looked at the roof, I looked at the furnace, I looked at the windows. That house I would have no problem renting that house out. And like I said, I've rented houses for 45 years, and I would buy that house and rent it out in a heartbeat, because it's a well-designed. It doesn't need windows, it doesn't need a roof. You know, we're gonna get $30,000, we're gonna tear it down in 3 years, and we're gonna move forward with the project. We didn't buy that land with the intention of renting the house. When I was at the Park and Rec conference, there's other counties that have done that. They bought land and had a house that they weren't gonna basically need that land right away, so they rented that house out, got the revenue, and when you have to get rid of it, you have to get rid of it. But right now, we can get basically $30,000 out of that house, and we're budgeting $7,000 for maintenance over the next 3 years. So we're only saying we're gonna keep $23,000 of that, but it's still $8,000 more than it's gonna cost to demolish it. And we'll have somebody on site. The expo center, the wiring's bad. I mean, Rick's out there all the time fixing stuff, and he's on site rather than running from the heart of the city all the way out to the expo center. It's 5 minutes for him to get there. You know, it's like a win-win situation for basically the county and Rick and the taxpayers. The taxpayers are gonna pay nothing to get rid of that house. They're gonna get that house demolished and have $8,000 profit at the end of 3 years. So I hope my supervisors support this, and we can basically save the taxpayers a few dollars. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was one of the 3 no votes on Personnel and Finance for a few reasons. I just don't like the precedent here. We don't rent out property to employees. I applaud Mr. Helms wanting to be there and his ability to be there, but we have lots of departments that have on-call people, highway, aviation, or airport facilities, I guess sheriff's department. We don't provide housing for people. When I was with highway, I was on call a lot, responded to many emergencies around. We had a call schedule, we had staff that rotated that. To say that one person is going to be living at the park to respond to emergencies, that's just not right. It's not good for the employee, even though he's willing to do it. It's not good for the county. Anyone who's aware of churches, they used to have church parsonages. Those are a thing of the past because people can't live at their job. It doesn't work. And I just don't feel that this is the right thing to do for this. We should not be providing housing for employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel that somebody made the statement about 2 supervisors in a committee have their names on this list. Well, I live in the United States of America, and everybody has their right to vote how they wish. I will not support anybody who says, no, you can't do it because our committee said you can't do it. I mean, think about what you just said a minute ago. You know, we're here to do something for Winnebago County. People have the right to do their own voting. And if we can find something going on that property, why not? It's foolish not to. Unless you want to give us the money instead of us making the money on the side. I mean, I'd be glad to take it. Put it in the park budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Albrecht.
I voted no, but I voted no basically just because I felt also like Supervisor had just said that we're starting a precedent for rental property. We don't do it for other departments, and I don't feel as way we should do it for this one.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to remind Supervisor Fari that the infamous pickleball court project was a project that the Personal Finance Committee voted down 0-5, and thanks to you changing how we funded it, that passed. So I want to remind them of that about disagreeing with what the committee did. I'm also in agreement with Supervisor Binder. This is a win-win. We're making money. Rick Helms is offering in this. We're not pushing it on him. He's offering to do this to be able to take care of the park and be very close by. This precedent, I really don't get this. If there was a house by the airport and someone from the airport aviation department wanted to have it, I would be open to it. If somebody wanted to work in the courthouse and wanted to maybe see if they could rent out the wheeling room, I wouldn't be object to do that. We're not providing housing. This is not workforce housing. This is an individual that we have an opportunity, we have a house, a residence, he's willing to live there and pay rent. And I gotta agree with Supervisor Binder, do you wanna pay for costs of demolishing the runway when you can get somebody money back by someone renting it? And after he leaves or after the agreement, we can look at it. I think there's a win-win situation, and I really don't care, that's the wrong word. The precedent, I don't see really fault in that, really. If there's a very good case. And the good case is the park is kind of, out of the city, and we have someone who will be able to watch it. Otherwise, the park department is going to have to find people or someone who's going to lock it up every night, because I guess the highway department person who did that is being taken away, and we have to spend more money on doing that. So you people say we act like a business. I think there's a good business proposition here. I think we have an employee, well-trained, well-certified to the job, and he's going to pay his rent. I don't get that. We're not giving him free room and board. He is paying this $800 of rent. I think it's a win-win, and that's why I urge you to support it.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I read this resolution, I read in it that the prime benefit of the resolution is that you would have an employee to on site to be able to address issues after hours, going to lines 37 to line 43. events that occur after 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and throughout the afternoon and evening hours on weekends. Now, the question raised in my mind is, what happens after the 3 years? You no longer have the benefit of the employee living on the property, and it's going to be just as the chairman or the member of the Personal Finance Committee suggested, that this is going to be a bad policy for the county board to rent to employees. Now, does that mean that when we get the mobile home on County Road Y set up for the individuals that it is zoned for? Does that mean we're going to be able to rent that out to someone just because you can make a couple extra bucks? I'm afraid that we need to take a hint from those members of the Finance Committee who went into detail on this issue and determined 3-2 that this is not a good idea. Well, I can't support it, and I'll call the question.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. So there was a motion to call the question. Is there a second to call the question? There's a motion and a second to call the question, so that is, that takes precedence, and you cannot debate it, okay? So that means we will go directly to a vote to call the question, which basically would mean end debate and go directly to a vote on this. Now, that requires a 2/3 majority to pass, okay? So we will go directly to his motion to call the question to end debate and go directly to a vote. Vote aye if you want to call the question, vote no if you don't. Remember, it takes 2/3 or 24 to call the question. And to call the question, not to vote on the resolution, to call the question to end debate. And then we would go to a direct vote on the resolution. Okay? And that motion fails 15-19. So we will continue with our debate and discussion of the resolution. So do we know who had called in? There were a number of folks who had called in. Unfortunately, okay. So we're going to go ahead and start with Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Warnke, and please go ahead and call in so we can continue debate. We had to clear. Oh, you're correct, Supervisor Fari. I know Supervisor Singstock was next, so you're correct. So we'll call on Supervisor Singstock first, followed by Supervisor Fari, then we'll go to Supervisor Warnke. So please go ahead, Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to respond to Mr. Fari's concern. Rule number 18.3. Any decision of any standing committee may be appealed to the board by any supervisor at any regular or special board meeting. So that's why it was done.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Appreciate the clarification. So next speaker will be Supervisor Fari, and then it'll be Supervisor Warnke. Please go ahead, Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before my question, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I don't question the right to do it. I simply said during my term of 18 years, I've never seen it done. That's what I was saying. Now, specifically to the issue, had this resolution said we want to offer to rent this to the general public, that would be a whole different matter. This resolution specifically is renting it to an employee of the county and that Parks Department. So I tend to agree. We are setting up a precedence that could be maybe contrary to our best interest, because we don't know where this is going to go. I'm still reluctant to support this, and I don't believe I'm going to, but hopefully I've explained to everybody my concerns, the concerns of the committee, and the step we're about to take is actually a pretty serious one, so please consider it carefully.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
I also have been in the rental business for over 50 years, and the numbers that are being thrown out on this thing where you're going to make $30,000 is certainly not a true number. First of all, you've got to pay taxes, you've got expenses, you've got things that are going to go wrong with this property. It just is not going to happen. And the number that I heard for ripping it down of $15,000, that cannot be right. I mean, we have a department, a county here that has a lot of equipment, and they could go over and rip this house down themselves and haul the stuff away. So the numbers that are being thrown out are not true numbers. We're not going to make $30,000. And if there's a major thing goes wrong with that for plumbing or something, we're going to lose all that rent money, and then we're going to end up with nothing. So I will not vote for this, and that's the way I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start by saying I don't hate this. I think it's a great idea to look for a way, especially if we're not tearing it down, to instead of taking a loss on a property, to make a profit off of it. But my concerns with this specific resolution, there's 3 of them that may have partially or somewhat come up, but I don't think we're fully spoken to. One, my biggest concern is what happens if there's a major event or something, black mold found, somebody gets injured on the property. We're liable for all of that from a county standpoint. The second thing is we'd be renting this out to a specific individual, and it's plausible, or it's possible that that specific individual may no longer, hold his position for maybe gets a promotion or moves on, which would put us in a real awkward spot. And then the other concern I have is having him on property. His time off needs to be his time off, and I'm concerned that if we rent this out to a employee, that they'll be doing additional work for the county that we're not paying them for, and I'm not a big fan of that either. I would be interested in hearing a possible solution where, kind of accounting for all that risk factor, we would leverage a third party to do the leasing and things like that, so that way we know we're not showing any kind of favoritism to our employees, or offering some sort of hidden comps for folks that aren't spelled out in their job descriptions. So I would be interested in hearing a future resolution around that, but this one does have some concerns in case of issues that do come up. I think would create a real awkward spot between us and our employee.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a tough one because I wasn't sure how I was going to vote when I come in, and I'm still not sure on how I'm going to vote. But I understand, and those of you that don't know Mr. Helm, you probably couldn't ask for a nicer guy as far as working and all this and that. But I also understand about this part about an employee. What happens if he leaves or he gets hurt or something? Whose fault's it going to be, or things like that, or his family, If something happens there, is it going to be our insurance that picks it up and everything? Whose responsibility is that? I have a real hard time, but a lot of you are saying because he's our employee. What if he wasn't our employee? What if they went ahead and rented it out to someone else? Would more of you go along with it then? Say if they said, well, we're not going to have anybody from the parks rent it. But Joe Blow from the highway could, or whatever, because they're down the road, they're not part of it. So I'm still looking for an excuse to vote one way or the other, so keep on going.
Good thing for you, Vice Chairman Egan, we got several call-ins yet, so. All right, thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see the big word flashing here, conflict. Seems to be conflicts all over the place with this. We're talking about, unfortunately, I guess, a specific individual who is a county employee. I'm not sure it makes any difference. Since when is the county in the business of renting out part of its property or things that own to anyone, yet alone an employee? I think I'd like to, how do you know that that's the right price? If the price is $5, that's a fair price, and you rent it to him for $4, isn't that a subsidy to an employee, which is illegal? We're not allowed to accept, remunerations for anything. So I asked Mary Ann, is this illegal to do this without having any idea what the price is really fair, or just renting it out to an employee? There have to be conflicts in there, doesn't there? Or not?
I'll call on our Corporation Counsel first to answer.
Supervisor Winren, if in fact we have this contract and it's an arm's length transaction, I don't see it being a conflict. In terms of the fair market rental value, I would assume the Parks Director could respond to that.
Yeah, I was asked that question. I do have the comparables here. It's pretty well confirmed. It's in that range of $800 for a standard farmhouse. There are not that many. Admittedly, there are not many to look at out on the market, but it's in that range of $800. And if I could add, as far as whether it's done by a government entity for its employees, there are examples of that with the DNR. Fond du Lac County, one of the samples of the lease came from something they had put together. They no longer do it. It was a camping arrangement and so forth, but UW does it as well. Some of the narrative came from those documents.
I mean, we have extremes. We have department heads that don't even live in the county. Now we're going to have county employees that live off the county, sort of, maybe.
Thank you, Director Way, and thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker, Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I'm going to add too much to this. I think a lot has been said on this. I'm kind of with Supervisor Egan on where I stand with this. Some of the concerns I have is much like has already been deliberated about the well goes out, that kind of stuff, and like Supervisor Winker said, now we're the county's in the business of renting out its property. I guess my issue with this is that it seems like it's predetermined. Like, and I'm sure this gentleman is a fine gentleman, but it seems like it was already pre-picked that hey, we're gonna go ahead and do this. I mean, what? Maybe somebody would say, hey, I'd like to rent this thing out for $1,000. What's stopping them from then letting that out during Country USA or Life Fest or something like that? Maybe that's in the lease. I don't know that, but it just seems to me that some of this was maybe predetermined, and so that would be my concern with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Just for clarification, the county doesn't pay property tax, so the $30,000 is a pretty accurate figure minus expenses. There's going to be some basically things that could go wrong with that house, but we don't pay property tax as a county. You and I pay property tax as a homeowner and as a landlord, but if you can show me a property tax that Winnebago County pays, I'd love to see it.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Spellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a number of issues. The first one was I had a question about whether it was tax-exempt property. I assumed that because it was owned by the county, there was not a property tax on it. But that's already been covered now. Thank you. Well, what happens if the employee leaves this position or is removed from his employment? What are we going to do then? Do we still say it's fine for him to live there? Having lived in what I would describe as company-owned, tax-exempt property for about 30 years of my marriage. But trust me, there are some real pitfalls, potential pitfalls, both for the county as well as for the employee living in company-owned property. There could be there are some potential pitfalls. Just trust me on that. Having been in that position for about 30 years.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker.
Chair, can I get a clarification from corporate counsel on paying taxes when we're collecting income on property like this? And because if this is true, the county could go out and build apartment houses and everything and have an advantage over the regular person who has to pay taxes.
Okay.
So is there a clarification that we
Sorry.
could get?
I want to get, I've given you the opportunity for the clarification, but then no further, I want to go on. But do you have an answer to that question? Then we'll go on to the next speaker.
I would defer to the finance director.
All right, finance director? Or do you need some time and then we'll come back?
I would have to look into the apartment complex, but we do not pay real estate tax. We pay personal property tax on different properties.
Well, you're still getting
Right.
income off of it. How can you not?
I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask a question, but Supervisor Spellman was the next to speak. So if you have more after Supervisor Spellman, you can add. So we'll move on to Supervisor Spellman. Please go right ahead.
As a member of the Personnel and Finance Committee who voted in favor of this, I want to explain my position. First, the three parties that are most affected by this resolution are in support of having this passed, and those are the Parks Director, the employee who wants to rent this house, and also the customers who will have a quicker response time if we have someone on site. So I want to reiterate that this employee does want to take this step, does want to do this, and while I applaud my fellow supervisors for being concerned about his work-life balance, I think he can call that on his own and make those decisions on his own about his life. I also think that we're running a risk if we continue to have the property vacant. And it was expressed in the committee meeting that there are vandals, people being on the property when they shouldn't be, and that having someone in that property actually would make the park safer and would also be more convenient for this employee, as he stated in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Spellman. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Youngquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Spellman took some of my thunder away from me, but that's good. She's on our side. However, though, you have to remember something. You have a person who lives in the area. If something would happen, he's there 24/7. You got some people that they live X miles away from work, so on and so forth. But if something would be going on, he's right there. I have been through the parks many times, and I've always seen somebody roaming it. So I think it's the right thing to do. He's going to live right there. Why not take advantage of the situation to complete things for Winnebago County Parks? I know some people, they're afraid that something may happen, or why can't we do it for my friend and my relation, but that's got nothing to do with it. We're talking about Winnebago County Parks, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Youngquist, followed by Supervisor Konecki.
I echo Supervisor Powers. It's never good to rent to employees. What happens if he retires? Is it part of his job that the housing goes with him? What if he gets let go? No, with all due respect, I do not know Mr. Helms at all. What if he can't pay rent? Are we going to evict him? It is never good for an employee to rent from an employer.
Thank you, Supervisor Youngquist. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I voted for this resolution, and I listened to all the discussion, pro and con. Nothing has changed my mind. I think it's worth a try. I think the pluses outweigh the minuses. The minuses, I don't see very much at all. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, could you clarify again? I think you said that there is a contingency or some clause saying both parties can, you basically, void the contract given 120 days notice? Can you re-clarify that?
No, it's pretty wide open with written notification. Either party can notify the other that within 120 days they would be vacating the property. No penalties.
Okay, so given that, I think that does have, helps alleviate some of the security concerns we do have if the individual were to, leave their position or any other situation. We at least have that measure in place. And it does say from both sides, so either party can decide if they don't want to be on that property any longer, that's in there. So at least we have that, and I think, that helps alleviate some of the concerns other people have had. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Weiss, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also tasked with being undecided on this issue. But one of the things I would like to clarify, at least in my own mind, is what no disrespect to Mr. Helms, but what if he were to want to farm the land or rent the land out, sub-rent the land out for farming? There's 19.6 acres there. That might be very, very lucrative because it does say property and dwelling. So it sounds like he does have the authority that he could do anything he wanted with the land. And as could we if we didn't have the house there. Possibly we could be renting it too and have a lot of money coming back to us. So I'm in the crossroads right now too on this. I just, things in my own mind, if anybody can answer that, I'm not into property management at all on that end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiss. I'll call on Director Way in the back.
Sure. I think more the application of not farming, but perhaps taking advantage of the expo with, I think somebody mentioned renting out the property at a special time. We took that into account. There is a provision in there that restricts any sort of profit or business being brought onto the property by the tenant.
Thank you, Director Way. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have Rick Helms make a few statements for this. Thank you.
I don't know if that's really appropriate to do.
You're going to tell me no one's ever sat back there and talked during a meeting?
I think during the public comment period, that's one thing.
During a meeting, we've had it done.
I think we're going to hold off on doing that. So, okay.
There we go again.
So seeing
Good old boys.
any other call-ins? Was there one other call? Oh, please, the Finance Director has one other comment.
I did find state statute 70.11, and I will do more research into it to get your answer, but I did read a paragraph that says leasing a part of the property does not render it taxable if the lessor uses all of the leasehold income for maintenance of the property or construction debt. So, I don't know that we would be doing all that, so it could possibly be taxable, but I don't want to make a ruling on that until I read this more in depth.
So you're saying that if the person that rents it maintains it at his own expense, there's not a problem. Is that what you're saying?
It is saying the income we make if we use that for leasehold improvements or repairs, if we use that whole income for that.
Well, you're going to have to use it if there's a problem.
Right. So it looks like we could possibly be exempt, but I would want to do further research into this before giving you a for sure answer.
I just can't believe that you would be exempt, because if it was, you could certainly make an awful lot of money by not paying taxes and building rental properties.
So I will send the board my interpretation after I read the whole state statute.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
Can we call for a recorded vote?
Absolutely. We will call for a recorded vote, Supervisor Eisen. So seeing no other call-ins, we will go to a vote. Vote aye if you approve the authorization of the 3-year lease agreement. Vote no if you don't. I do want to remind you, it requires a 2/3 vote of the members present because of our rule 7.6. So just to clarify for you, because Personnel and Finance did not approve it. Our rules state it requires a two-thirds vote of the county board members present. That would be 23 this evening. Okay? So vote aye if you approve, vote no if you don't. So that motion fails 16 to 17 with one abstention. Okay? All right. So we'll move on down then to the next resolution. And that's resolution number 258-12-2019. Authorize execution of a 3-year expo rental agreement between Winnebago County Parks Department and the Wisconsin Futurity Horse Festival. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move resolution number 258-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 258-12-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 259-12-2019. Authorize the Public Health Department to accept an Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin grant for fiscal year 2020 in the amount of $85,100 and appropriate the funds to program expenses. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Make motion to approve resolution 259-122019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 259-12-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 260-12-2019. Authorize the transfer of $190,000 from Parkview Health Center's unrestricted fund balance to the Parkview Health Center's capital equipment account for the neighborhood range hood project. I'll call on Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion that 260-1222019. Marlea's in the back, and she can explain what we're going to try to do in a new deal in all our households.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. So there was a motion and a second to approve resolution number 260-12-2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. It's resolution number 261-12-2019. Authorize a change of funding source for the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Fox Cities campus roof repairs from bond proceeds to a transfer from the undesignated general fund, total cost of $50,000, with $25,000 being reimbursed from Outagamie County. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 261-12-2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 261-12-2019. Any discussion? I see Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Who or what committee came up with the idea to not bond for it and take it out of reserves?
I'll call on our Finance Director, Vicki Fitzgerald.
Thank you.
I came to my Personnel and Finance Committee and asked them for this. As I was working with the director, or the Assistant Director of Finance as well, we looked at this, and it was in the original CIP plan, but it's under $100,000, which is what we define as capital project. And then as we looked at the project, the breakdown shows all kinds of little repairs, $2,000 here, $2,000 there. We realized it really is repairs and maintenance, not a capital project. So with that, we wanted to move it to the regular operating budget.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank
that
you.
observation. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you, Supervisor Fari. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 262-12-2019. Authorize Winnebago County to enter into a 2-year contract with Cintas Corporation for the purpose of mat and uniform rental and cleaning services. I'll call once again on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 262-12, 2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 262-12, 2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. It's resolution number 263-12, 2019. Authorized extension of lease agreement between Winnebago County and United States Department of Agriculture. I'll call on Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the resolution 263-12, 2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 263-12, 2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll once again do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So moving on down then to the final resolution this evening. It's resolution number 264-12, 2019. Amend the table of organization for the Winnebago County Public Health Department by adding one full-time community health strategist position. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 264-12, 2019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 264-12, 2019. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes our business for this evening. So I will call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. So there's a motion and a second to adjourn until special orders January 7th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.